free. The absolute best price. Nobody ever complained about getting something for free. So let me show you how to make more rosemary plants from an existing plant for free. So rosemary, probably the most popular perennial herb amongst growers. You know, you'll find people growing rosemary, not even for food, just as an ornamental. You know, much like lavender, it's got these very cool purple flowers that come out fairly early in the spring. It's perennial, so it doesn't die back. It's always green. And it's very, very easy to grow and very forgiving. But for me, rosemary has an unbelievable flavor and scent to it. You know, out of all the herbs, besides maybe basil, rosemary is the one that I always have to be growing. It's also a big seller on the farm stand. You're growing rosemary from seed, even though it is a vigorous grower, can take years. It is so painful to watch that I've simply never attempted it. Fortunately, rosemary is dead easy to grow from cuttings. Now, there's two ways to do rosemary from cuttings, and for both methods, you only need three things. One, you need a cool glass to put them in. Number two, you need a pair of scissors. And number three, you need an X-Acto knife. So, let's get started. So, for both methods, the rosemary cutting is harvested the exact same way. You want to take new shoots that haven't flowered because they are the most likely to take rooting. This would be a good candidate here. The one beside it is another good candidate. Even some of these ones up top, they'll work, they'll root. You know, rosemary is very easy that way. So let's go ahead and take a few cuttings. Now you want to cut them, you know, I usually do them about 10 inches long. That's what I've had the most success with. Okay. So, step number 2, you can use the scissors, but I find the X-Acto knife works much, much better. So, I'll show you using each. So what you do is you take your rosemary, and so the last, I'd say probably 3 to 4 inches, just get those leaves right off there, right? So it leaves you with a bare stem. Take your X-Acto knife. What you want to do is you want to shave some of that outer layer off. Right? You see florists do this with cut flowers. The reason for this is you want to create more surface area for the water to get through and for the roots to start coming out. So we'll do one with the scissors too. Take your rosemary, take the last set of leaves off. Okay, grab the scissors. Okay. Well, I assume with a sharp pair of scissors this would be a lot easier, but it still works, just not as ideal. There we go. That's 2 done. So, just going to quickly do the other 2 using the X-Acto knife. There's 1. There's 2. The X-Acto knife. Boom. Okay. There's 1. X-Acto knife. All right. Now, got them all done. All 4. So, that is common to both methods of rooting your rosemary cuttings. So now is when the 2 methods diverge. So before I get to the 2 methods here, I do want to mention something. A lot of people will use this stuff. Not particularly this brand, but IBA. So it's indole butyric acid. What it is, it's a rooting hormone. It really works. You know, it's really good. Something like a rosemary, though, which seems to have adventitious stems, you don't really need it. It won't hurt your plants. It'll probably make some of the fringe ones that wouldn't root. I don't like to use it because I want to grow the strongest rosemary, and I feel like it gives a lot of the ones that shouldn't be rooting a crutch and gets them to go. So I don't use it, but if you do, all you do is you wet the stem, dip it into the powder, and do one of the two methods that we're about to discuss. Pretty easy stuff, but you don't need to use it. It's an added cost that you don't have to have. Okay, here we go. So this is where the two methods differentiate from each other. So method number one is the simplest. You take your pond water and your cool glass. You fill it up to about 2 inches above where your leaves end, and you simply drop them in. Just like that. All right? Now, I do change the water about once a week. This does take about 4 weeks, and these guys will send out little white roots. When they do, when the roots get pretty big, like maybe 2 inches long, and there's several of them, maybe 10, 15 roots, that is when you would pot them up, just into a regular potting mixture for small transplants or plugs. Lighter the better. So, as you can guess, method number two is simply potting these cuttings straight into soil. Now, the great thing about the rosemary cuttings is the stems are quite woody, so you don't want to make holes in your soil like you would for a lot of cuttings. 2 reasons why. One, you don't have to, and two, it could create an air pocket where the roots simply won't be able to take hold. You want that little white root, when it first comes out of the stem, to either hit water or hit wet soil. And so this way, if you just plunk it in like that, and this guy, plunk this one in like that. Now, you generally want the whole stem to be buried. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the tips off of these guys so that they sink all the way down. You could just use a taller pot, but this is what I have available. Just cut a bit off of here. Ooh, those are woody stems. Okay, plunk that guy in. Perfect. Take this guy, cut a little bit off, just a little bit, because it was almost on the soil already. Plunk that guy in like that. There you go. Hey? Couple of rosemary cuttings. So, what you want to do, it's about the same time frame. Maybe a little bit less, because depending on your soil, I've got a mixture of compost in here. I've got some alfalfa and canola meal, which does have rooting hormones in it. These guys can often go quicker than the stuff that's in just the water. So what you want to do is you want to lightly tug on these guys, in a few weeks, to make sure that they've rooted. Now, rosemary will grow quickly, so it won't take long, probably about a month to 6 weeks, that these 4-inch pots will be needed to move on to gallon pots. And that's when the rosemaries are ready for sale. And if you're not selling it, if you're just transplanting it to somewhere in the garden or to a larger pot, you can simply go straight from these into your garden or into your 4 or 5 gallon pot, which is a great end location to grow your rosemary. So that's it, guys. 2 different ways to root your rosemary cuttings. Easy stuff. Rosemary is a staple in most vegetable growers' gardens, and there's a reason for that. It is so fragrant, it is so tasty, it is so versatile. For red meat, white meat, fish, for veggies, I do find it a little bit overpowering. So what I do is I would dry the rosemary first, simply hang it in a cool, dark place, much like you would your garlic. Only takes about 3 to 4 weeks to dry, and then put it in a simple spice shaker. It just takes the edge off of the fresh stuff. And if you're ever making roasted vegetables, even stir-fry vegetables, a little bit of that rosemary dust just kicks it into high gear. Now, one thing to note with rosemary, it is a very, very vigorous plant. Do not think that you can just place it in a little corner in your garden in a little 2x2 plot and it'll stay there. It is like a tweener between a tree and a bush. It will grow large. It will take over, a 10 by 10 foot area if you let it, just like lavender would. So I find if you're not willing to do the pruning every year, just put it into a 5 or 6 gallon pot. It'll be happy there. It probably won't need to be repotted or replanted, for 5 to 8 years. And by that time, you're taking off your own cuttings and starting your own new little plants that you can simply just replace the big old bush. But yeah, just be very careful of where you put it in your garden. So that's it for today, guys. I hope you like rosemary as much as I do. Click subscribe if you haven't already. For those of you that have, thanks for the support. I do appreciate it. Leave some questions or comments down below. Do you grow rosemary? Why do you grow rosemary? What are some recipes you use for it? Comments are always welcome. Well, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.